Well, good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, I guess, if you're on the West Coast. My name is Graeme Spicer, and welcome to Edge Live. This is the second of these Edge Live events that we have undertaken, and hopefully we'll be bringing you many more of them in the coming weeks and months. Tonight, it's a roundtable discussion where we're going to blow up 3 different myths about home studio recording. I just want to take a second first to tell you a little bit about the new HSSS, which is the Home Studio Support Squad. When Edge Studio brought George Whittam into the fold, and we were very excited to have the VO Studio Tech family with us, one of our objectives was to make George and studio support generally more accessible to a broader range of voice actors. And there was this perception, can't work with George, he's too expensive, or I can never book him. So we have dealt with that by creating the Home Studio Support Squad, which is George and a team of the very best studio engineers across America who will be able to help you as you are working through your studio issues for fixed pricing. And you are going to learn all about how you can access the fixed pricing model for the Home Studio Support Squad towards the end of tonight's hour-long session. So as I said, we're going to blow up 3 different myths, and just let me pull them up here. We are going to talk about microphones. If you don't have a good microphone, you haven't got a chance. Your mic choice is so incredibly important when it comes to the sound of your home studio. That's myth number 1. Myth number 2 is don't worry about the acoustics. It's okay. The engineers will fix that, in post-production, in the mix. It'll be okay. So it's not a big deal. We're going to blow up that myth for sure. And the third myth is, if a $300 mic is good, then a $3,000 mic must be better. More expensive gear is always better. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. So with that said, I want to turn it over to George Whittam, who's going to introduce us to his panelists tonight.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight for our Edge Live. This is the first one we've done from this setup, and I'm really glad to have a team of some great guys here with us tonight. In our Brady Bunch window, I'm in the upper right, of course. Hi, everybody. I'm George Whittam. I'm the Director of Technology for Edge Studio, and I'm out there to fix everybody's audio problems, make your lives easier and more efficient, and help you win more jobs and do better jobs when you get them. That's my goal, and so I've realized I can't do it alone. I'm only one person, so I've been out looking for some great technicians that are out there in the world of voice acting, and I've found a few. We've got about 8 people on the team, and I've got a few that were able to join us tonight, fortunately. And so, and if another one pops in, I'll certainly introduce him or her if she can make it. But in the upper left-hand corner, we've got Andrew Feliciano, who is the owner and operator of VoiceTrax West here in LA. How you doing, Andrew?
Doing very well. Nice to be talking with everybody.
Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andrew is an engineer. He owns a studio. He knows the studio business inside out, upside down, backwards and forwards, Mac, Windows, you name it. He's a mad genius, and he knows his stuff. And another mad genius right below me is Stephen J Cohen. How you doing, buddy? He's right down there. Hey. Where are you hailing from tonight?
Well, originally from Brooklyn, New York, but I'm in the Berkshires. I'm in Western Massachusetts.
Oh, okay, very nice, man. So we got a little bit of East-West happening tonight, and Graeme is in Toronto, so we've got truly East-West. Awesome. So, Graeme, I don't know if you want to run the topics tonight or if you want me to do it, but what do you think?
Let's start with this whole idea that the choice of the microphone is something that we really need to agonize over. And we got to make sure that we get the exact right mic for our voice, or else our career is doomed to failure. And I'm pretty sure that's a myth. And I'd love to hear what you guys think about that.
Well, I mean, I'll start by saying that, and I was telling Andrew before, and I will preface this by saying I'm not a voice actor, but I have to do a lot of presentations, I do videos, and I want to sound good. And I've been using the same very inexpensive MXL microphone for doing this stuff for a really long time. I think this thing's 15 years old. I believe I paid $100 for it. I can't even remember. It's that long ago. Not to say that that's the mic right for you, or the right mic for you, but I mean, sometimes $100 mics sound really freaking good. And sometimes they might even sound better than a $3,000 mic. Now, there's other things that can make a mic sound better than, another, accuracy or noise floor, things like that. But sometimes you get lucky with a very inexpensive mic. Stephen or Graeme, go ahead.
Yeah. So Andrew, you are a studio engineer. You're dealing with recordings that are being produced by, other studios all across the country all the time. So do you feel that there is an appreciable difference in audio quality between the audio coming from one studio that's using an Audio-Technica 4040 and another studio that's using a Neumann TLM 103, and then a third studio that's using a Rode something or other?
There certainly is a difference, no doubt about it. It's the big, when you ask a lawyer any question and their answer is it depends. And it's, so there's a lot of that, coming at this question. And so it's, if things are quiet, if the mic you got, fits you well, all that stuff, if certainly it will be better, but it doesn't always matter. One thing you get with the U87 is quality control. You can guarantee you spend $3,000, that mic is going to come out of the factory sounding great. George bought a $100 MXL mic, and that one is good. Someone else bought one, that was sitting next to it, and it may not have been as good because they're not doing the quality control. And that's one way they get that mic to be $100. So from that standpoint, it's, you can get really great stuff. Quality control has actually gotten better on these cheaper mics over the years because they've been made, it's probably been 5-10 years. We've been getting these $100 mics that are pretty good. And so, so that's one aspect of it. And when you're starting out, if you're newer at it, I'd say it really doesn't matter that much because you're still honing your craft, honing, mic technique, honing your space, honing all these things. So getting started, I think, is the more important thing. Then you move up the chain in mics for other reasons, as you go along.
So Stephen, a question for you then is, what's the least someone should spend on a microphone as they're getting started?
Boy. See, so yeah, to set a firm number is a hard thing, but the mics I have here in the booth are a really good example of two very inexpensive mics that do a very good job. This is an Audio-Technica 2035 right here. Very similar to the 2020, slightly different. Actually, its sound signature is closer to a mic they don't make anymore, the 3035. And the mic right next to it is also an Audio-Technica. It's the 875R, which is a very, very tiny shotgun. Both of these mics are in the low $100 range. Neither of them are very expensive microphones. And they both give good sound when used properly. And that goes back to what Andrew is talking about. As long as you know how to get a good sound out of your microphone, and that's craft, that's skill. That is the one I was talking about. Yeah, you've got one right there. So George has got, that's the entire mic. So it's an incredibly short shotgun. And because it's such a short shotgun, it actually doesn't have a very pronounced, what would you say? That barrel is not long enough to create that kind of voice of God sound, right?
Right. Yeah.
But it's a wonderful travel mic. I use it here in the booth when I need this. I mean, I'm mostly recording audiobooks when I'm recording, so I'm mostly on this other mic here. But if I'm doing something that needs that presence of a shotgun, I'm using the mic I'm talking to you on now, which happens to be this one.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. It's an awesome stunt mic because it's so inexpensive and it travels really well, and it's designed to take the abuse of field use because it's supposed to be on a camera. It's a great one to keep in your bag.
So, Stephen, the Audio Technica 2035 is like $200 or something. So you're
less.
not even okay.
Less.
So you're getting paid, good money. You have been for many years recording audiobooks on a sub $200 microphone.
Well, George knows that I've actually gone through a couple of mics in here. So I was actually one of the people who believed what you were talking about before, that I needed more pricey equipment. And without going specifically through what mics, I've sold some. I still have some that I really liked, but don't seem to be as perfect a fit as this one particular one happens to be. But yeah, everybody's got to learn that lesson of, more isn't necessarily better. It's because, of course, when I started working, doing some early on stuff, and I'm being handed a Coles 4030, being handed a really good ribbon, and I'm working with that, I've got different kinds of expectations when I try to sit down in here and try to figure out, well, what microphone do I need? Because I'm remembering all the stuff that when somebody else was paying the bills, that they were able to bring in to Symphony Space for us to do recordings,
So, George, a question I'd like to give to you then is, does the perception of the brand matter when people are picking microphones? And Andrew, I'd like to kick this question to you as well. Like, I'm not sure what microphones you have there at VoiceTrax West, the studio that you run in Los Angeles, but do you have people kind of, we will only record our talent on a U87. If we don't have a Neumann U87, if you don't have a Neumann U87, then you're not the studio for us. Do you find that there's a bit of mic snobbery out there that matters when voice actors are selecting microphones?
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of that. I mean, you must have been listening to Andrew talk and I beforehand, because this definitely came up. No, he wasn't. No, this exact topic came up, in fact, and Andrew can speak to his situation. But if you're not marketing your studio, brand names of parts and bits and bobs on your website, and there's a lot of argument, you can argue either way whether it's worth doing it or not. If nobody knows what you're using, then it doesn't matter. What matters is what they hear and if they like it or not. That's what really matters. But there's something to be said about some people. I liken it to cars. Some people are happy driving a Camry, and some people just got to drive a Lexus. And they're the same damn thing underneath. They are the same engine, drivetrain, everything. But they just got to have a Lexus because they just feel better driving the Lexus. It's a feel thing. And there is something to be said for that. Like if you're using an expensive mic, you feel a little bit more, maybe a little bit more professional. Maybe it bolsters your self-esteem, as an actor, to have a better microphone. And this comes back to the axiom that is, don't buy the gear to get the work. Once you get the work, use the work to buy the gear, because then you'll earn that better gear and you get to kind of step up the ladder a little bit.
The number of times I've heard everything was fine, and then I got that mic I was dreaming of, that expensive microphone, and then suddenly I can't work in my studio. I'm hearing noises I didn't hear before. There's all these rumbles and all these things that my $100, $200, $300 mic didn't hear.
Right.
And now that I have, this Neumann in here, or this whatever, this Manley reference mic, I now suddenly hear the dishwasher from my neighbor across the hall.
Yeah.
So sometimes a better mic, the idea is what's better for the application that you're doing. You want to be able to pick up your voice in a way that sounds like a large diaphragm condenser. If you're doing work that, that's your target. If it's a shotgun. If it's something else, it's something else. But you want your voice to have that sound, but you don't want to be picking up every sound outside. So if you're living in a less than perfect environment, then a better mic for you is not necessarily the more expensive mic. It's the mic that picks up accurately your voice and as little of everything else as possible.
Yeah, your voice and your environment. Andrew.
One note is Stephen meant the Manley reference mic by the company Manley, not a Manley reference mic. 'Cause many people probably would not know that Manly is the name of a company.
Yeah, Evan Manly is actually,
and it's a very expensive, super high quality.
It's impressive. If you get to listen to it, it's impressive. But I don't know that I'd want one even here inside the studio bricks. I don't know that I'd want a mic like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the from the studio angle of this, one of the things. So we have several U87s. We have several Sennheiser 416s. Those are the main things that pretty much we use for everything. A couple lavaliers for ADR and different things like that. But one of the reasons for that is not so much that like that's what everyone wants, or that's but it's there's standards in the studio world and in the voiceover world, particularly, when it's the 416 on the West Coast, more so. And so if someone was at another studio, or they're traveling, or they were at a U87 in New York, and then they're in LA and need to do a pickup, and then they come in and it's like, oh, can we put up the U87? So then now we're going to have we're going to match those signals and match those sounds in our room. So that would be one reason why you have them, at least in the studio world. And if you move up the chain enough in your voiceover business that you have a 416 in your booth at home, and you're traveling and you need to do a pickup for, some commercial or something that you work from home, you can go into a studio and say, hey, can you put up a 416? Because that's what I have at home. And they're going to have it. There's that aspect of having these very standard mics that, and actually why I actually don't get any of these, any kind of boutique mics or things like that, because repairability becomes an issue and things. But if you're on your own box, doing all your stuff, then the sky's the limit. So, there's, some things of why you would stick with, some standard mics that have been around a long time, and why you might not.
Andrew, you had mentioned earlier that one of the big differences between the $100 Chinese sourced microphone from MXL or one of these, CAD, one of these lower end brands, and the Neumann is that Neumann's quality control is great, and that you can trust that the Neumann mic is going to sound great. And with the MXL, you might get a great one, you might get a poor one. The other important point to note here is that not only will you get a U87 that sounds great, but all U87s sound the same. Like there's very tight tolerances amongst all of the output of that particular microphone. So I've certainly run across that problem before when traveling, is that I've recorded something here in my home studio on a U87 and I can't use a different mic, even another expensive mic like a Manly, to record pickups for that particular project, because they'll never be able to, or it'll be very difficult for you as the studio engineer to try and match that sound.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah, it's all because sometimes it's about speed. It's like, yeah, you could match it. We could do our fancy studio things and, engineer stuff and make it match. But how about you do it and they drop it in and it works. That's.
So gentlemen, is it fair to say then that this whole idea of, that new voice actors should be agonizing about their mic choice, and that the mic they choose will have a marked impact on their success as a voice actor? Can we consider that myth then busted?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yep. I would say definitely. And, I dare even say, and I did a review on these on Whittam's World, that there are a slew of USB microphones now that work really, really well. And so if your budget is very small and your capacity for learning new gear is small, and you just don't want the added complexity of a mic and an interface, there are USB mics now that are up to snuff. I honestly feel that you can do some great sounding work on a USB mic. It doesn't have any expandability. It's sort of a kind of a, one-shot deal. You get what you get, and then when you're kind of outgrown it, you put it away, sell it, or keep it as a spare. But there are some good ones out there as well. So even for under $200, you can actually buy a USB microphone that can achieve you great quality. So just start with an affordable mic and watch videos on YouTube that we've put out, about home studios, and don't get distracted by a sales guy at Guitar Center who, is doing his best, but may just recommend something that he heard might be good, or he thought an SM7 was the best voiceover mic, and it turns out that it's not an easy mic to work with, So Start with some of the tried and true things that we talk about.
Can I add one thing about USB mics? It's just
Sure.
kind of an interesting thing. So I get that question a lot about them, because when somebody's thinking, I have a USB mic and should I be using an XLR? And I'm like, well, here's just one thing to think about. One thing George talked about is they're not really expandable, but a lot of people don't get why. Anyone who remembers when you could buy those combination TV VCRs, remember when the VCR was built into the TV? And eventually the VCR breaks. And so you think, I'll just get another VCR and I'll plug it in. Then you turn that unit around and there's nowhere to plug the VCR into, because of course they built it so it was one big unit. That's kind of what's going on. Remember that USB mic is not using an interface. It's just using an incredibly tiny one that's inside that mic body in order to get there. So what you're buying is you're buying both of those pieces together. And yeah, like George says, if and or when you outgrow it, you're going to outgrow that unit and you'll go on to something else. Or maybe that will become your road kit when you go on to something different. But always be listening to yourself on different mics so you can get a sense of, wow, this one is a little bit better because I'm a little sibilant, or this one really brings out some of the depth in my voice that I wasn't sure was there. Listen, but your first choice is never going to be your last.
I remember the axiom that I have lived by in the past couple of years is I wish that when I had started as a voice actor, I'd spent half as much money on equipment and twice as much money on training. And George knows, because he rides me about this all the time, is that I've been through everything. I've had Manly reference mics here.
Gear slut.
Oh my God! Yeah, no, Graeme. So there's a forum on Facebook where we sell used gear. Graeme sells the coolest gear.
Yeah. Anyway, so mic choice, the whole myth is busted, is that you're better off just getting something that is serviceable and then start working on the craft. And let's worry about, as George says, don't buy the gear before you get the work. Get the work and then worry about the gear. Let's move on to myth number 2, which is the whole idea of, do you know what? The acoustic space in which you record isn't that big a deal, because even if it's a little reverberant or even if it's not perfect, that as long as you capture the voice well, then the engineer in the recording studio will be able to fix everything that's wrong with your recording. So that's the myth that's out there. Stephen, why don't we start with you?
Oh, good. Oh, boy. Well, no, you hear this. So there's a lot of talk about using noise removal tools, because noise removal tools have gotten really sophisticated. But the thing to remember is the noise removal tool, no matter how sophisticated it gets, honestly can't tell the difference between my voice and the sound of that fan that's down there at the bottom of my booth. If that fan is on, a noise removal tool is going to pull some of my sound out as well. There's just nothing that's going to stop that from happening. So if I'm using something like, I'm using an LDC that's kind of detailed, once it goes through noise removal, this is going to sound like a dynamic microphone. It's just not going to have that detail left, because a lot of people just take all of their audio and dump it through noise removal instead of just taking out that little noise here and there, all those things that remove mouth clicks and sounds. I know I'm sort of taking this into a little personal tangent, but I've just seen so many people take some wonderful sounding audio and just take all the personality out of it without realizing if that's what they're doing.
Yeah, that's one thing. But I can tell that you've put some effort into tuning your booth acoustically. Why is that so important?
Well,
acoustic
you
versus
actually
noise,
helped with that.
leading you down the primrose path. But acoustics, right? We're talking about the space around you. Why is that so damn important?
Right. So, so my experience before being in this booth was doing sound on a large sound stage. So when I first set this thing up, when I got the booth, I called George and I let him know. I said, this is a weird duck booth. It's not quite a Studio One. It's not quite a One Plus, because Guillermo was coming up with the One Plus at the time. So this is one of his prototypes. But George listened, and when I told, I mean, I'm used to dealing with a theater with that can seat 300 people. I'm not used to how sound bounces in here.
Yeah.
And that was the expertise that I came to George to hear and find. And he really helped me understand what's being bounced and what's being absorbed. And we get back around to the idea of, is the sound bouncing off parallel surfaces? What's going on? If you can make the room sound good, then even to go back to the previous question, even an inexpensive mic is going to sound good.
I've heard some pretty amazingly decent sounding recordings done with, dare I say, an iPhone microphone, like the mic on the iPhone. If it's held in the right place, not too close, not too far away, and the room is quiet and it's dead, it's shocking how good the mic is, even in an iPhone or an iPad. Can you get away with it for some stuff? Probably. Would you want to use it all the time? Heck no. But it just goes to show how important the acoustics are around you. I mean, that is the deciding factor. I mean, if we're going to have an order of importance, the acoustics is way above the mic in terms of what's going to determine that final sound. And I mean, Andrew, you're really into, processing and production and all that mixing. Have you found any great tools yet for reshaping a room acoustically? Like, is there any plugin for Pro Tools that can take a crappy sounding room and get rid of all the comb filtering and the reverb and the resonance and click a button and you're done?
There are some amazing tools out there, but for instance, I'm not going to think of it, but there's a hardware box that is used in post production that's been around a long time. It costs $6,000.
Cedar?
And it, maybe that one. But and it does an amazing job of taking reverb out of a room, but that's like a very specific situation. That they're fixing things where they don't have control on a movie set, and so they're trying to do something to make a shot work that they can only get now, but it's noisy or it's in a room or whatever, So that's a specific situation. I mean, when you in studio environments and voiceover, it's, you do have control because you will set up and control the environment best. And it's like, there are some amazing. Isotope is so good now, which is a very popular noise reduction tool.
RX.
And this newest version, their newest version is just amazing.
RX5.
RX5 and. But it's something that should be, you use it when something happens that you don't intend, or that's the goal, at least with them. You're going to fix something, but you want to get things captured properly the first time, and so room treatment is before the mic, certainly, and it's amazing what a strange beast it is, because in this room that I'm sitting in now we have a self-service booth for actors to come do audiobooks and things like that. And we originally did it, and you can see behind me this beige kind of fabric. We'd kind of put that everywhere along with some insulation and things like that. And then I walked in and was just like, oh no, like it sounds terrible because the fabric is reflecting the high end in my voice. And all of a sudden, this room sounds weird, and I feel weird being in it. And this, this was more, I think, for a male voice that has more, low end, some high end, but the high end was being reverberated around the room and made it sound really strange. And
the microfiber, is that what it is?
Exactly.
It's
microfiber. Yeah. But we had it everywhere, ceiling, walls, all around. And so then we ended up taking half of that out and putting in some more loose weaved fabric, and then it sounds great,
like a burlap-y kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's it can be a strange thing, but it's not. There are some basics to it that even at home, you can set up some things that will, are not so expensive and can, help a lot.
Andrew, I think that you bring up a very good point when you say that there are these amazing tools. Like I have Isotope RX5 and I do use it, but I think that many voice actors are using this stuff inappropriately, where they just take their audio and run it through RX5 as just a part of their processing rather than using it judiciously and only in those situations and only in those locations in the file where it's actually needed. Going back to what Stephen said earlier is that, these things they're digital processes. They are sucking the soul out of your recording. And I never quite realized to what extent until I was running a file of mine through, I don't know, D-Click or something in RX5 the other day, and clicked the little button that lets you listen to what it's removing. And it's like, holy crap, that's half of the fun stuff in my voice. So it's important to use the tool for the purpose that it was intended, not just as a rote part of your processing chain.
Right. Now, so iZotope isn't the only game in town. In fact, George had done a video early on in a Whittam's world from a company called Acon Digital, their digital restoration suite. And I'd gotten in touch with them, and they make a tool that's price competitive with the very cheapest version of iZotope. And it's a little bit different. And I showed them the video that George had done, and I actually worked with them on the beta. They've actually added a whole bunch of VO presets to the newest version.
No way.
Yeah. And they're really nice people, and they've been working and developing it. And by the way, if you have that, I think you reviewed either version 1.4 or 1.5. That same license is still good for 1.7. So you just go to the website, download the new version, and you've got the presets in there, and they've reworked the algorithm. It's really very nice. And so you don't have to feel like, well, you have to use this one, same sort of a thing that we're saying before. Everybody check to see if you get better results applying iZotope or if you get better results applying the Acon Digital Restoration Suite, one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Can you spell Acon for us, Steve?
ACON. I would, it'd be great if we could actually put in the comments the link to George's video about it, because it was a great.
Yeah, we'll do that afterward.
Yeah, so George's follow-up, then, if you could put that in the description and also the link to the Acon site, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I just showed a preview of the screen while you guys were talking, showing the actual Acon website, just so people know what it looks like. But yeah, acondigital.com, ACON, and look
Thanks
for
a lot,
restoration.
Steven. You just cost me $100.
You can't stop buying plugins.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, you can't stop buying plugins. And then iZotope RX came out with they're like, wait a minute, you guys are selling a plugin pack for $100, so we'll make one for about $100. So now they sell one that's a 4-pack of the same tools for $129. So yeah,
right.
It includes 90% of anything I've ever used in RX5 in that one little plugin pack. So
yeah. So, and the nice thing, both of those have a demo. The demos are disabled in certain ways, but the demos are both functional enough that you can download the free demos and really evaluate which one do you actually think like.
Yeah, exactly. And then
sorry, George. Andrew, so just to tie a bow around this issue of acoustics, as a recording engineer, you get some crappy audio in from a recording studio in Seattle, Washington, or Toronto, Ontario. How can you actually make that sound as good as if it had been properly recorded in the first time? Given unlimited time and lots of money, can you fix it, or is it just so irretrievable it can't be fixed?
I mean, it depends on how bad it is. If it's really, really, really bad, of course that's, it's hard to do. There's only so much you can do. But if it's moderately bad, you're sort of taking something and cleaning it up, and then it also depends on where it's going. If it's going with music behind it and a bunch of effects, or into a movie or things like that, it's like, well, there's going to be a bunch that's covered up from that, and maybe you'll be able to notice, maybe you won't. So it depends a little bit on where it's going. Is it going to an e-learning video? It's going to go onto a website that won't be seen that much. It's like, well, maybe we don't care like all that much. Is this going to go onto onto a record, or into a movie that's going to stand the test of time. It's like, well, maybe we want to consider putting a lot of time into it, or consider re-recording it if possible. So there's that depends question again, but you can do a lot for sure, but depending on how bad it is.
So George, just quickly then, and seriously, give us like a 90-second answer here. If acoustics matter, if we all now agree that the myth is busted, that acoustics do matter, is it possible to come up with a home recording solution for like $1,000, let's say, that is going to get an aspiring or beginning voice actor started?
Yeah, the big thing that people have to battle against is noise. So if you're very fortunate to live in a cul-de-sac, have a basement, have no offspring, no animals, and you have like a control of your environment, if it's a quiet space, you can slap up a PVC pipe wee hutty or tent, or you can build a frame and hang blankets all over this thing. You'd be blown away with how effective it can actually be at stopping enough reverb, enough echo, and just enough background noise from maybe a computer fan or something like that, to create a very dry, dead sounding recording environment. And most producers want something from you that's going to have very little acoustical character of its own. They want to be able to take what you're doing and make it fit what they're working on. So if what you give them sounds like it's recorded in a living room, but in the video it needs to sound like they're in a car or something like that, it's going to be very hard for them to make it work, or it's going to take a lot more time. Time is money, and productions do not want to pay engineers to fix these things. So you really want to make sure you're giving something that's very dry and neutral and has very little coloration. It should sound kind of like a microphone is hooked right to your face almost, but without too much of the proximity effect. And you just find that sweet spot on the placement. And we didn't talk about placement, but placement goes hand in hand with this, where it just sounds familiar. That's the best way I can put it. It sounds real. It sounds familiar, but it's a little bit larger than life, a little bit better than real life is what you're kind of ending up with. And that can be done for very little money these days. You can get a $200.
We can agree then that, people don't have to suffer through this myth that they have to have a custom built recording booth or recording environment. They can start in a walk-in closet, or they can start in Amanda.
Hey, we got to add someone else to the chat.
Amanda came. Hello, Amanda. So we can agree then that it's possible to create a satisfactory recording without having to put a Studio Bricks booth in like Stephen J Cohen has, or something even more elaborate.
Yeah, as another old axiom is, you live where you choose to live, and if you live in Manhattan, man, it's going to be tough.
Hey guys, I don't know if you noticed, I'm here.
Hey,
sorry, I'm a little late.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
We just added Amanda Rose Smith, who is based in. Where are you? You're in New York City, right?
Brooklyn. Yep.
Brooklyn.
Yeah. I moved from Brooklyn up to her old neighborhood, and she moved from up here down to Brooklyn.
Thanks for joining us.
Just quickly, Amanda Rose Smith is an extraordinary engineer based out of New York. She does most of the work that is done out of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation voiceover lab, and we're honored to have her with us. And she also does some work out of the Edge studios in New York. We just wish we could get more of you, Amanda. That's all.
More cloning.
Yes.
Exactly. Anyway, we're so glad you're here.
Thank you.
So let's move on to the third myth then. And we touched upon this when we talked about the first myth, but I think that it extends beyond just microphones. This whole idea that more expensive gear is better. Like, I want a preamp that emulates the preamps that were in the console that the Beatles recorded Abbey Road on, and nothing else is going to do. And I'll spend $5,000 on that preamp. Does that make a difference? George is laughing because he thinks Graeme probably did do that. Does that make a difference? Does that, are you going to have a marketable advantage over other voice actors if you take that step up to more expensive equipment. And Andrew, let's start with you. We started with George the first time and Stephen the second time. So,
I'd say the biggest thing that I face, and even someone at home would face, is more expensive gear is fixable, and that is just one of the things that a U87, and if you get it serviced and repaired, you can keep that mic 25, 30, 40 years. And that's something that is, it's an investment. It's beyond, other things. Same thing with preamps, or just like any other. Well, not everything, but
I'm talking about analog gear, though. Analog gear.
Analog gear, yeah, for sure, and can be repaired. Even some digital stuff that if you're getting analog to digital, A to D, D to A, converters and things like those can be repaired and things like that. And so that's something that you will get with that. But it also, it's like, well, $3,000 like for U87, or even $1,000 for a TLM. It's like, but I could buy 10 MXLs, that maybe sound like that. And so maybe I just go with the route of just like, it breaks, I buy another one, and it might take you 15 years to get to that $1,000. That might be something as well too. But it's not. There are advantages, lower noise, in everything, which helps the whole chain of that. But do you need that? That's the question there. Like starting out, no, probably not. Especially if you don't have a good, if your acoustics are sort of coming up to par, things like that. A $3,000 mic will sound terrible in a room with bad acoustics. So in that sense, then it really doesn't matter. So you might as well, get the cheaper stuff.
Amanda, you work with some of the best equipment in New York, and then you work in smaller studios and at the SAG-AFTRA Foundation studio, which is largely built on donated equipment and stuff. And, not everything there is $5,000. Do you think that more expensive gear is better?
I would say if you have money to spend on one thing, make it your space, because that's going to be the foundation of everything that you record. And a great mic in a bad space is just going to show exactly how bad that space is, So sometimes cheaper mics can actually make for a better sound in a space that might not be ideal. I mean, when you're looking at some of that really expensive equipment, you got to think, in these really expensive studios, it's okay to capture everything because you want to capture everything. But sometimes in more home studio situations, it's better to have something that will capture exactly what you need it to capture. So,
George,
yeah.
George, what are your thoughts on? I know what you think about. I could fill the entire rest of tonight's show just by saying the word tube to George Whittam.
Well, tube gear is a great example of maybe expensive is tube gear is maybe the exception to the rule. If you're buying tube equipment in general, if you really want to use tube gear, don't buy the cheap tube gear like the Art brand stuff. There's one thing they make that's okay, but if it's a $200 box that has a tube in it, the tube is really a marketing tool and not really a great part of the signal path. It's not really doing much. So if it's a very
dim light bulb.
Yeah, and they make gear now that glows on the inside just to make you think that it has a tube in it. It's like that's become a thing. But tubes don't really generally contribute to the overall quality of your audio, and then sometimes they can cause more noise floor to occur. I mean, I've compared $2,000, $3,000 tube mics to solid state mics that cost, a tenth as much, and the solid state cheaper mics are often quieter. So, I mean, our biggest battle in a home studio is noise, and anything you add that contributes to noise floor is not going to be a good thing. So look for mics that are really low noise, and some of them are not that expensive. A CAD E100S is about $300 now. Maybe they're really more like $400 to $500 now, but they have extremely
the Rode NT1A.
The Rode NT1A is an extremely low noise microphone. It's a little sibilant. It's a little bright, but it can be tweaked. But But getting off the mic topic, because we've talked about mics a lot, preamps or audio interfaces. I found some amazing values, and I work with everybody from the ramen noodle budget, learning voice acting, and they've just spent all their money on education, and they got nothing left for gear, to Joe Cipriano and Scott Rommel and all whatever, name drop all over the place, and there's some value gear out there that's mind-blowingly good for even under $100. There's a USB interface made by a company called Steinberg. It's called the UR12. It's about $80, maybe even less sometimes. And it is clean. The preamp is good. Even the headphone amp has some juice to it. It'll drive headphones pretty well. It's simple. It seems to be made pretty well. And there's that thing to do much better than that. So let's say you've got a mic, an interface, and a computer, and you're looking to upgrade something. Assuming your mic is not your issue, if you want to upgrade something, you'd have to spend probably 3 to 5 times what that thing costs to really make any noticeable difference. And even then, you'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference between the preamp and the AD converter of this $80 box and say another favorite, which is the Audient ID 212 or 14 or whatever it is. They're 4 to 5 times more expensive, and they sound almost exactly the same in terms of sound quality. So interfaces are definitely not one area to blow a lot of money, I don't think. Preamps are another big thing. People want to get a sexy channel strip with sometimes tubes, sometimes not. Maybe they want to have a bunch of EQ and compressors and all that stuff on there. There's one called the DBX 286S. It's about $200. I've been blown away with how good that thing can work and sound in a professional studio, in a home studio with a 416. There are some really great values to be had out there in terms of gear that sound really great. So there's a lot of good choices that don't cost a fortune.
So George, do you think that someone that has like a Rupert Neve is like a legendary. Electrical engineer who's designed some of the best recording equipment in the world for the last 40 or 50 years. Do you think that someone who has a Rupert Neve preamp feeding into their Apollo Twin, is that going to sound better than actually just running your mic into an Apollo Twin?
Is anybody we know? No, it's... well, gosh, I mean, this can really lead to a whole nother conversation, which is, can you emulate the sound of a great piece of analog gear in a digital world, which is kind of the way we're going right now. We're taking models of sometimes very expensive gear that is, legendary, $3,000, $4,000, $6,000, $8,000 pieces of gear, and we're modeling them digitally so that you can use that piece of gear in a virtual world. And the thing that Graeme mentioned, the Universal Audio Apollo, is one of those pieces of gear that allows you to do that. And so if you've got a $3,000 Neve and you have an Apollo and you plug in the same virtual preamp as that outside gear, do you need both? And I'd say no. I would say no. The Apollo is so good at emulating. Even Ivana Manley of the Manley company that makes these legendary tube gear, she has even allowed Apollo or Universal Audio to license her tube preamp now, and you can get a plug-in for that. So that to me,
I was playing with it today, George, and it does sound awesome.
Yeah, that to me speaks volumes about what we can do now in a digital domain. So I've been very, very big on the Apollo hardware because of that. So if you're somebody who really wants to have more tools in their toolbox, wants to have more flavors, needs to process audio real time. In other words, you're doing source connect, IPDIDL, and you're trying to get a certain sound straight down to the client. That is a really good way to go these days. And for less than $1,000, you can get the hardware and the plug-in of your dreams, a Neve or a SSL or whatever, and you have a really amazing rig.
George, one of the best stories I think you ever told me was about your friend Bo Weaver. And Bo, who has, practically the exact same setup in his studio in Los Angeles as he does in his studio in his home up in Ojai or wherever it is that he's at. And he takes a Sennheiser 416 industry standard microphone, and he runs it into an Avalon preamp or something, but a $25,000 or $3,000 preamp. And then he runs that into this little Alpha Lexicon digital to analog to digital converter, which is worth $89. And he's perfectly fine with it.
49 bucks. I keep at least one or two handy at all times because they just plug and play. They work with every OS. They're simple, they're low noise, and they just freaking work. I've been trying to find a better solution than that right now, but it's hard to find one that does the job that well. So I don't know, Amanda, in your travels, have you discovered any interfaces that surprised you, like that some client had or something you heard about that was really amazing for cheap?
Well, it depends on how cheap you're talking about. I'm partial to the Duet, honestly, which I have. That's Apogee.
Yeah.
The only drawback being that as far as I know, it only works on Mac.
Yeah.
But I think it has, Apogee, of course, has been known for a nice, really clean sound. And so I'm partial to that. It's not terribly cheap in comparison to some of the other ones you've been mentioning. I think it's about $600.
Yeah. Mid-range.
I like it a lot. And, a lot of people use the Scarlett.
Yeah.
It's not particularly low noise, but it is a workhorse, and it can do, for the bang for your buck, it can be really good too. I know a lot of people that record audiobooks on that.
So, to all the folks that are tuned, thank you so much for joining us. I want to mention that the Home Studio Support Squad, which is this new team that George has put together to allow us to better serve the voiceover community by providing the best minds in the business at fixed pricing. So there's always going to be you're always going to know going in how much you're going to pay to have a specific issue addressed. And George, we've got, Amanda Rose, we've got Andrew, we've got Stephen J, and I know you've got other top-notch people on the team as well. How do we go about accessing the Home Studio Support Squad?
Well, Graeme, I'm glad you asked. Well, I'm going to the page right now. It's on, see if I can get this to show up in this without getting cropped out so much. There we go. If you go to vostudiotech.com, which is also available right from edgestudio.com's homepage, you can get to the tech department there. You'll see a link that says Home Studio Support, or HSSS. That's our Home Studio Support Squad. And so if you're looking to get a problem solved, let's say you've got a noise issue or a buzz, or you've got glitching and you don't know why you're getting glitches and dropouts, or there's a new version of software out and you're just really nervous about installing it and you want someone to hold your hand or make sure that it's the right choice, this is a good place to go. I love helping people, and I troubleshoot and tech support for a lot of people. But, people that have scheduled time with me know that sometimes they might have to wait a week or so to work with me. And and sometimes you don't know exactly how much time you need, which is kind of tough too. Like if you book time with me, you might book an hour and go, I don't know if I need an hour. I might need more or less. And that can be, when you're budgeting, can be tough. With the Home Studio Support Squad, you can just pay a flat rate based on the urgency of your issue. So that's what we decided to do there. We decided if it's of low urgency, we can usually get back to you under 24 hours, sometimes a little longer. That's going to be $79 per incident. If you need a little bit faster turnaround than that, then we've got a middle tier, which is $119. That's like the high urgency. I need to hear from you today. That's high. And then we've got urgent. And urgent is for like things that are keeping you from getting your work done, and you need to get help as fast as possible. And for that, we try to get back to you under 4 hours, and sometimes maybe less than an hour, and that's $159. So each time you're getting the same service, you're just paying a little bit more, or paying more for the urgency. Then once you pay, you just open a ticket, and from there you're able to start working with our techs. And we use a software called TeamViewer that you download and install on your computer, and that allows you to be helped much, much more effectively. It's totally secure. If you're not using it, nobody can get on your computer. If it's installed, and unless you give somebody your password, which changes every single time you start the program, nobody can get into your machine. So there's nothing to be concerned about in terms of security. And it works fantastically well. So I recommend it if you just need something fixed, just need to fix it. We've got really great people working with us here.
Fantastic, George. So the home studio support squad, finally we can get George and we have a fixed price plan so that you know what you're going to have to pay in order to get something dealt with.
Yeah, and sometimes it's me that's going to fix it, and sometimes it's going to be one of our other team. It just depends on the workload. All of our techs are pretty busy engineers and voice actors themselves. So we try to continuously build the team bigger and bigger. So we've got, as we say, a deep bench. Steven, I think you were going to say something. I saw your hand come up. No, he was faking me out. So check out Home Studio Support Squad, and one of us will give you a hand. We've got people that know Mac and Windows too. We got people that are experts on both.
So George, it's just coming up on 9:00. Any parting words of wisdom with regards to voiceover myths? We've busted 3 of them tonight.
Yeah, man. Well, we've really gotten to the point now where it's inexpensive to create a good sounding studio if you can get your noise under control. If you're in a low noise environment, you're going to be in good shape when it comes time to making something sound great in your home. So we know that we can do this effectively on a tight budget these days. So don't go nuts, but save a little bit of money for some consulting. If you've already watched all the Whittam's World videos, you've already watched all the EWABS videos and the VOBS videos, and I work with people sometimes that say they've watched all of this stuff and they still want to work with me because now they think their heads are so full of information they don't know what to do. Save a little bit of that budget that you put aside for education for some consulting. I'm really big on people getting their maximum value out of that time, and that investment should really pay off. It pretty much always does pay off for people when they make that investment, and saves humongous amounts of time in the long run if they make that investment.
Fantastic, George. Thanks so much. Stephen J. Cohen, Amanda Rose Smith, Andrew Feliciano out in beautiful Los Angeles, and George Whittam. Thank you all so much for sharing your wisdom and for exploding 3 myths about home studio recording for voice actors. This has been Edge Live. My name's Graeme Spicer. Thank you all so much for checking in with us tonight. You can always reach us at Edge Studio at 888-321-3343. Any questions you might have with regards to tonight's content, feel free to give us a shout. 888-321-EDGE. And you can always reach George through the system that he just outlined and the rest of his team. Once again, everybody, have a great night. Please go out and book lots of work tomorrow. And until the next Edge Live program, take care.